In less than a week, Canada will have their say on who is leading our country. Will Liberals hold on to the power, or will a new party take the lead? And what does a new parliament mean for Christians? Julia Beazley from the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada is with me to help us navigate through some of these big election issues. Thanks for joining me today, Julia.
Good to be with you.
So what are would you say, and what would EFC say, are the top three issues that many Christians should be looking at and listening for in this coming election?
Gosh, there are a lot of issues at play in this election. It's kind of hard to pick a top three.
Yeah.
And to be frank, my top three or the EFC's top three might not be the same as someone else's, which is okay. I would suspect that, as with many other Canadians, concerns about the pandemic, economic recovery, cost of living may be top of mind. But beyond these, I think Christians our concern generally orients around certain themes. So it's part of our discipleship and our responsibility as Christ followers to care well for our neighbors, and in particular for those who are vulnerable, to uphold and defend the sanctity of all human life, to seek justice for those who are oppressed, and to care well for the world God gave us. And there are many issues that fall within these areas of responsibility and concern. But for the EFC, some of the issues we will be paying particularly close attention to include the expansion of euthanasia and assisted suicide, and the state of palliative care in Canada, defense of our prostitution laws, and the many facets of the fight against exploitation online. And then there are a number of issues that would be part of what feels like a growing intolerance and marginalization of people of faith generally, including, of course, evangelicals. So I know that was more than three. I could have named others, but that's just a sampling of what we're watching and listening for heading into this election and into a new parliament.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. There are so many issues that we as Christians are concerned about and need to be concerned about. The number one was, as you said, medical assistance in dying. Let's delve into that a little bit more. Sure. It's here, it's legal in Canada, but eligibility is set to expand in 2023 to include mental illness as the sole reason to qualify for MAID. What are you looking for, and what should we be looking for when it comes to what political parties are saying on this particular issue?
Yeah, well, we've talked about this issue lots before, so I know you'll understand when I say that the EFC was grieved by the expansion of access already to those who aren't dying. And this was in spite of such an outcry from the disability community. So, I would love to hear a leader say, we got it wrong. We went too far, too fast, and we need to walk things back, or at least we need to go back and make sure there are substantive protections and safeguards for vulnerable Canadians. But in the least, as the government does look ahead to this expanding eligibility to those with mental illness alone, we will look for caution. It's hard to imagine that there could be adequate and appropriate safeguards to this, but we want to see recognition of the gravity of that task and a commitment to the strongest possible safeguards. And let's not forget that expansion of access to mature minors and by advance request are also on the table. So again, here, I would love to hear leaders say, we've already gone beyond what the courts have required and we won't go further. But barring that bold stance, we need our leaders to show restraint, caution, and the greatest of care on these questions. And of course, at the same time, as I mentioned, we're looking for commitment to palliative care. It is unconscionable that we have made hastened death so accessible when we've not yet addressed the need for quality palliative care across the country. Not to mention access to the medical, social, and economic supports needed by those living with disability, or adequate and timely care for those experiencing mental health crises. So addressing all of these things urgently is one of the ways we can safeguard vulnerable Canadians.
And, Julie, I think this leads into my next question, because we all watched the debate last week, and yet MAID was not one of the questions. I'm racking my brain. I don't remember them talking about this issue. I don't remember palliative care coming up at all. So many Christians are struggling with finding a party that fits their values. No major party will go near abortion laws, for example. And as we just said, MAID is something that almost feels like it's already done with and people have moved on. What would you say to Christians who don't feel like they can vote for any party?
So I think I would say I get it.
Yeah.
I hear you. I am one of those who feels a little bit at home in a few different parties, but not fully at home in any one. So on the one hand, I think this makes my work in a nonpartisan organization simpler, but it also means that I have more than once faced that very same challenge at election time. So I mean, first, this is a decision each of us should commit to prayer and ask God to give us wisdom and discernment and guide us in our decision making. And then for me, I think it usually ends up being a question of where do I feel most at home? What party aligns most closely with my concerns, priorities, and values? And other times, it has probably come down to specific issues. So what are the issues I am most concerned about right now that are most critical to me, my family, my community, sometimes my work? Who will respond best? And then I do lots of listening to what's being said. I read, I'll question candidates if and when I get the opportunity, and do my best to discern the best choice. I think that, you know, despite these sort of challenges and uncertainties and questions, it's important to vote because, you know, we all know this is a right and privilege that too many people don't have. And because voting matters, voting is part of how I seek the welfare of my neighbors, my community, and the peace and prosperity of our nation.
Yeah, no, I think that's how all of us should be looking at this next election. I will admit I'm in the same boat as you, Julia, and I find home in a lot of different parties and finding it really, really hard to make a decision this year. This election, we've seen more protests at campaign stops as well, even gravel being thrown as politics gets more and more divisive. What role can Christians play in encouraging respectful dialogue, especially on social media, Julia? Because it gets pretty dirty out in the social media streets.
Yeah, I love this question.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of issues and questions on which Canadians disagree, even some on which Canadians disagree and on which Christians disagree. Disagreement isn't the problem, right? But as a society, we seem to be losing the ability to disagree well, to handle difference respectfully. And I say that knowing a lot of Christians feel anger and frustration and deep concern about lots of the things going on. You know, I have my moments too, but how we respond, how we disagree couldn't be more important, especially in a climate that is crying out for someone to model civil dialogue and disagreement. And I think that we should be modeling these things. As I understand scripture, it all boils down to this: loving God and loving our neighbors. So one of our jobs in this world, in our words, our actions, the ways we engage with and love our neighbors, including those with whom we disagree, is to point people to Jesus. So we can disagree. We can and we should communicate our concerns with particular laws or policies. In fact, the EFC invites people to do this all the time. We are called to speak truth, to call for and stand for justice. But as followers of Jesus, we're also called to do things differently. And in doing things differently, to point others to Jesus, who is our example. So in person, on social media, wherever we are, we should always seek to demonstrate love, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, and self-control. We should be respectful of our leaders, of those we disagree with. We can make sure that our speech is gracious, that our posture is humble, and that our interactions, even and maybe especially with those with whom we differ, are characterized by respect for them as people who are made and loved by God, whether or not we feel that respect in return.
Yeah, well said. Okay, we have a minute left, and I don't want to rush this particular issue, but it was a hot button issue last week at in the debate. The Bloc Québécois leader defended Quebec's Bill 21, which bans public sector workers from wearing religious symbols. Blanchette said that the bill is not discriminatory and reflects Quebec values. How important is that for religious minorities to hear political leaders take a stand against Bill 21?
Yeah. I think that was an important and appropriate question to ask about Bill 21, though I would have liked to see it framed differently, focused, narrowly on the bill and its impact, and actually asked of all of the leaders, as you say, because it does raise important questions for a religiously and culturally pluralistic country like Canada. So Blanchette said that Quebec values secularism, and we don't take issue with that. A secular state, though, is supposed to be religiously neutral, but forced secularism isn't neutral, and it's not even-handed. So a ban on religious symbols isn't either, because it effectively pushes people whose religious convictions require them to wear specific clothing or symbols out of the public service. And as you say, this is discriminatory, and it's a violation of religious freedom. So I think it's extremely important for religious minorities, not just in Quebec, but in the rest of Canada, to be assured to hear from their leaders, and for our leaders to be reminded that a plural and open society respects and accommodates religious expression.
All right, Julia Beazley from the EFC. It is always a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for always staying on top of the issues that we need to be concerned about and educated about as Christians in Canada. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.